In this video, I'm going to show you how to run your practice by the numbers. We are going to go through the 6 growth levers of your practice that quickly adds cash flow. I will also define exactly what practice data is and show you how to access it for yourself. I'm Dr. Corey Frogley, co-founder and CEO of BlueIQ. Now don't take it from me, Dr. Bo Pierce discovered this process and in doing so has scaled his practice to a tremendous size and is now an amazing influencer in the provider network.
Hey guys, Dr. Bo here, and I want to give a quick shout out to the team over at BlueIQ. You know, their product that they have created literally may be the best analytical product I have ever seen. If you're not familiar with BlueIQ, what it does is it actually sits on top of your EHR system and allows you as the doctor to take a snapshot of exactly how your practice is performing at any time. You get to monitor all of the creative stats that you want to see as the day rolls out, as the month, and you can look historically back into figurative history. BlueIQ is the one piece of software that we seriously use every single day in practice.
Dr. Michael Henry has used BlueIQ, which has helped him with the challenges of tracking multiple locations. Now in one beautiful dashboard, he and his team have thrown away the spreadsheets and are using BlueIQ to scale their locations. BlueIQ is the perfect plugin to help them do that. I am committed to helping doctors around the world grow a bigger impact, reach more patients, heal the world. Never before have there been more threats to our way and our profession than there is today. So it's becoming a part of this BlueIQ nation that I'm committed to you, to helping you grow and scale your practice, because at the end of the day, that's reaching more patients and changing more patients' lives. Now, this profit formula has 5 levers that we're going to talk about running your practice by the numbers. And this master profit formula is the secret to scaling any practice, whether you're just starting or whether you're ready to add more locations to your system. The first growth lever is all about total visits. Visits is defined as a patient encounter. And that can be online, that can be in the practice, that can be buying something off your online store, that can be, coupling products with the services that you do within your practice. But a visit, an encounter has value. We call that production. And when we look at production per visit, we really begin to understand how valuable those visits are. We build these visits by obviously bringing in new patients, by looking at what % of those new patients are converting to established patients or starts or care plan acceptance. We look at the total number of those visits that are growing on the schedule, and that has everything to do with making sure that we're getting starts and we're not getting patients leaking out the back door, going inactive patients. So having systems in place where we're watching the patient journey and making sure that they're staying engaged with your brand. We also track % kept appointments. That's what percentage of those appointments actually show up and are there for that service to be rendered. We want to know what type of rescheduled rate is happening. So every time a patient has an encounter, are we then making sure that there's a system in place to get them back on the schedule for a future service? Our systems are really good when patients stay engaged with an appointment, because if that appointment's broken, we have an immediate system to follow up and reschedule that. But if it falls off the schedule, that's where most practices are losing them, because they don't have a system in place to make sure that those patients are re-engaging. We also want to make sure we're looking at patient visit average. On average, when a new patient engages with your brand, how many visits do they end up coming in with that provider or with your practice? Now, these levers, when we really put them together and we're watching the patients go through the patient experience, the better the patient experience is, the more visits we will have with that patient. It's that 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your income is being generated by 20% of your patients. What if through this growth lever, you could engage patients longer, create more impact per visit. Make sure that they're engaging with your other services within the practice. We're attracting a high volume of new patients. That's when we start to see the visits continue to go up and grow. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to our channel and make sure you hit the notifications button so that you get notified when great content like this comes out. Our second growth lever is the average production per visit. And this is an important one because it took my practice from having to see a high volume but low production per visit to being able to add on services that complemented our primary core services, and by doing so increased our production per visit, and we weren't so dependent on such a high volume of patients that came through. But what was really nice is once we did get that dialed in, we were able to return our focus on increasing flow, increasing the volume of patients, which couple those two things together and you now have a truly scalable brand. Now, understanding this production per visit is kind of like going to a fast food restaurant. When you go there, they don't make a lot of money off of their single burgers. But when they add a drink, when they add fries, they start etching out some profits. And what we want to do is identify complementary services that fill your core competency. And when you add on those services, we really begin to layer in not only better patient outcomes, but we create more production. More production is more opportunity to collect. So this concept of production per visit is one of those things that we could talk a lot about, because by increasing it, 25%, we see a massive increase compounded by the number of visits that you'll be adding to the schedule. And again, the beautiful thing is BlueIQ tracks, analyzes, and identifies this and allows you to really dial in and see the data behind those numbers so that you can make a better decision of, is the provider prescribing the right services? Are they holding back on certain services because they forgot about that? And when you really talk about this as a team, you can see that this lever is a big one to increasing your cash flow. Moving on to growth lever number 3 is what percent of that adjusted production are you actually collecting? And again, depending on your practice, if you're collecting more money up front or you're collecting it after the services, this is a metric that must be tracked because it's a growth lever. It's a lever that allows us to see of that adjusted production, how much of it are we actually collecting? Many practices that are collecting money up front and delivering services after fall into this trap of actually over-delivering and giving away services that aren't being tracked that actually should be accounted for. And other practices that are collecting it after are not tracking their 30-90-day aging as well. They don't have a great system in place and working out agreements with the patients to make sure that the bills are handled. In fact, many practices I see, they're ever increasing accounts receivables, but never really knowing what should we be collecting of that. What of that is actually collectible? And that's a killer for practice growth. So that percent of adjusted production is calculated by looking at total collections divided by the total production delivered. Now it's the adjusted production. When you calculate that and multiply that times 100, you get the percent of that. I would recommend looking at that for a 90-day time frame. And then you can average that and see, on average, what are we collecting of our production. This is a very quick way to give yourself a raise, to have more cash flow to reward your team, to have a bigger marketing budget, is by increasing your percent of adjusted production collected. It is a powerful lever in the master profit formula. This now leads us to growth lever number 4, which is total overhead. Total overhead is something that has to be controlled so it doesn't get away from you. Your overhead is composed of several things, but we put them in 2 buckets: fixed costs versus variable costs. Fixed costs are all the things that you absolutely will pay every month with very little variation. These are things like rent and payroll and different supply costs that you have to have for your operations. But your variable costs are those things like a marketing budget and or other types of supplies that you use in the practice depending on what type of procedures you're working on that month. So we want to watch those variable costs because there's opportunities there that in controlling that, we can actually reduce our overhead if we're very careful. In reducing both of these, we can scale our percent of profits. And depending on your practice, you should be averaging somewhere between 20 and 50%. Again, depending on what type of practice you're running, what type of providers you have, what role you're playing in the practice. It is possible to have, not as big of a profit margin, but multiple locations, which then gives us a lot of profits to work with. Moving this growth lever is really powerful when you begin to watch your profitability in real time, and this is why BlueIQ integrates with QuickBooks, allowing us to pull that data in, run profit formulas in your dashboard, and show you this data in real time. Moving on to growth lever number 5 is putting it all together, looking at industry averages. We can create profitability and growth through running these formulas for you when we look at your real-time profit dashboard. We can look at new patient visits per month and patient visit average collections per visit, lifetime value of a new patient. We can look at average visits per month and what that leads to in your average production. We can look at what percentage of that production is collected. You see, there's all of these growth levers that fit into the master profit formula. And by taking those and watching those and understanding those and mastering them and how to control them within the practice, this is what leads to true practice profitability and growth. When we look at the master profit formula and we take your visits times your adjusted production per visit, times the percent of collections of that adjusted production minus overhead, we now have profits. And this is where your team gets into a daily, weekly rhythm of doing the right things that drive these revenue opportunities. Now, revenue opportunities show up in your practice every day with almost every patient encounter. Opportunities to schedule more appointments, or family members with more appointments, opportunities to collect past due balances, or family members with past due balances, opportunities to look at advancement or re-diagnostic opportunities. These are the things that your team has to be trained on, and by mastering them on that patient encounter every time, it is what drives the master profit formula to produce night and day different profits. Now, our doctors who have mastered these systems are seeing 20 to 200% growth with these systems. And I barely touched on them in this process, that we actually created what's called a BlueIQ Growth Challenge. And this Growth Challenge is a 30-day opportunity that you can put your team through this type of training. You go through 30 minutes of training and a worksheet every day for 30 days. And it's a game changer. In fact, the practices that we've had go through this can't believe the difference. The next month from the Growth Challenge, they had their best month ever in practice. And these are docs that have been in practice 10, 15, 20 years just by going through this free growth challenge, which the coolest thing about this is you get free access to BlueIQ's growth tools for those 30 days. So it's a no-brainer. So click the link below to sign up for the growth challenge. Unlock your growth potential and no more excuses, guys. It is time to have the impact on your team, your practice, and your cash flow so that you can become the provider you knew you always had within you.